When we last saw Geralt and his company, they began escorting a community of forest beekeepers from their village to the slopes of the ML Mountains. 5 days pass, and they have a peaceful journey until they arrive in the city of Riedbrunn, which was once a Northern Realm city, but due to its unmatched tactical value, being that Nilfgaard's army could march north without the obstacle of having to cross over the ML Mountains, Emhyr saw fit to rain wealth and luxury on the town to buy the city's loyalty. This being the case, the streets were littered with Nilfgaardian language, soldiers, and citizens. Once the party departs from the company of the forest beekeepers, Milva and Regis are tasked with gathering supplies, while Dandelion and Geralt go to the town square in order to obtain information regarding the druids they were searching for. Before they manage to ask anybody much of anything, however, 2 armed men approach them and ask Geralt directly if he is the White Wolf, to which he replies with the truth. They then tell him that the city's prefect wished to speak with him, and not wanting to cause any trouble, he agreed to go with them, and subtly told Dandelion to tell Regis what had happened, as he'd know what to do. The 2 guards bring Geralt to their town's prefect, who now sat across the room from him behind his desk, and began bombarding Geralt with questions regarding his destination, his traveling companions, and why they were there. Geralt effectively dodged all of the prefect's questions, until the prefect grows impatient and has one of his men bring a young woman out. A young girl by the name of Angulemi was brought before them, and that's how I pronounce her name. It's spelled like this, but there's so many weird names in these books, sorry if I pronounce them a little off. The prefect informs Geralt that Angulemi was recently part of a local gang that was causing him a great deal of problems. She was also currently his informant. Though no longer associated with the gang, Angulemi had learned that Nightingale, the gang's leader, had set a trap in order to kill Geralt by the orders of a half-elf. But that's not the only thing that she had learned. In many ways, she knew more about Geralt's journey than even he did. For starters, he was in the company of 4, and they were pursuing the druids south at the city in Toussaint. Though confused at the fact that not only did their company have 5, not 4, they also had no idea where the druids were. Geralt stayed silent and let the prefect get to the real reason why they were meeting in the first place. He wished for Geralt to spring Nightingale's trap and kill him, and in return, Geralt and his company's journey would be kept quiet from the Nilfgaardians occupying their city. This may not seem like that great of a deal, but he also knows that one of his companions has a detectable Nilfgaardian accent, and another who seems less than human. This being so, Geralt agrees on the condition. He wished to take Angulemi with him to now serve as his informant. They agree on the terms, and Geralt returns to his companions, joined by Angulemi. Once reunited, Geralt speaks with Regis about who could possibly be behind the trap. Their list of enemies isn't exactly short, so they hypothesize Meve for desertion, or Dijkstra for vengeance. But regardless, Geralt composes a plan. He proposes himself, Milva, and Angulemi go spring the trap and kill Nightingale and his 24 men, while Cahir, Dandelion, and Regis would go to the border of Toussaint and wait. Angulemi suggests that Cahir go rather than Milva, as 2 women and a Witcher would be significantly less intimidating than Geralt's proposed party. But Geralt says no. When asked why, he openly admits it's because he does not trust Cahir, who then obviously asks for an explanation. Geralt goes on a rant about how he believed the way so many people knew about their plan is that they must have had a traitor in their midst. Which is pretty fair, but at this moment, Cahir has grown very tired of Geralt's accusations, so he does the only thing that he can think of. He punches Geralt directly in the face. Now ordinarily, Cahir would be no match versus Geralt in a fistfight, but Geralt's knee was still very bad from when Vilgefortz broke his leg in Time of Contempt. And this being the case, Geralt was way too slow to contest Cahir's onslaught of fists, and the two have a much overdue scrap. The protest from their companions fell on deaf ears, and they continued rolling in the dirt and swinging at each other mindlessly until Milva had had enough. She takes what is essentially a leather belt and begins mercilessly beating the two with it. She lashed the two until they cower from the pain and begged her to stop. And this may sound just like a mother disciplining her children, but she smacked them all over the place, whether it be the face, Geralt's bad leg, the chest, didn't matter. An awkward silence kind of takes over until Regis eventually breaks it. But he doesn't get much of a word in before the moon literally turned blood red. The group traveled for 2 days before Geralt had them stop and addressed the group. First, to everyone's surprise, he apologizes to Cahir, which I'm sure, as you know, Geralt, doesn't often happen. He then reveals a change in their plan. After talking with Regis, the two discovered how everyone tracking their mission mistakenly thought they were traveling with a group of 4 and not 5. A mage could easily scan for life, so to speak, and discover their numbers. But as you know, Regis is a higher vampire, and that being the case, he would not be detected by any magic. So now they knew what had set the mission to eliminate them in motion: a mage. Geralt then said that him and Gulemi and Cahir would ride to the valley where they knew that the trap was set for them and extract some much-needed revenge. At this point, Geralt had lost hope in finding Ciri and was sure that she had died the night that the moon had turned red, which he thought was the equinox. And before they kill every last one of Nightingale's men, they would find out exactly who put the order in to kill them and track them next. Panda Ciri, who's playing with a cat and talking to Visigoda. She began telling him of a dream she had one night when Bonhart had locked her in a cell. She dreamt of the events that we just saw with Geralt, where she thought he had died on Thanedd. Seeing him was a shocking moment. But hearing the things that Geralt was saying, she tried to call out to him so that he could know the truth. She was not dead. Yennefer would never betray him as he had thought, and finally, the equinox had not occurred yet. But unfortunately, no one could hear her. So Geralt would have to learn all these things the hard way. Geralt and Cahir rode with Angulemi as their guide. Before they could find Nightingale, Angulemi brings them to an iron mine, where one of her past colleagues was the foreman, a dwarf by the name of Drozdek. The main interest of her questions involved the identity of the half-elf that Nightingale was answering to. At first, the dwarf was strongly reluctant to share any information, but Geralt uses his impeccable people skills, and the dwarf mutters 3 words: the Rialto Pit. They all arrive at Rialto, one of the largest of the local mines, and immediately Angulemi is recognized by 5 riders that she identified to Geralt as Nightingale's men. They approach without hesitation, and Angulemi tells Cahir and Geralt that she had a plan. Despite the riders sharing the information that Nightingale would not even remotely be pleased with an audience with her, she tells her former companions that the Witcher Nightingale and the half-elf were chasing was dead, and her companions had slain them. Cahir and Geralt remained silent under their hoods, and the bandits initiate a counteroffer. They wished to drag the 3 to Nightingale by the throats, and they could beg him for mercy. Geralt doesn't like this plan, so he drew his sword and came up with a counteroffer of his own. He gave his foes one final chance to reconsider their counteroffer, but they do not. Angulemi jumped from behind Geralt's shoulder, and using a knife from her boot, she took down another one. In a matter of seconds, Geralt killed another, and Cahir killed the 4th. The final goon quickly realized he was outmatched, so he mounted his horse and attempted to flee. But Geralt was prepared. He threw his sword through the air. And it struck through the man's chest and collapsed him off his horse. Following the brief chaos, a tall man approached them. He had overheard that the 3 of them killed the Witcher, and he wished to discuss it. The 3 indulged the man because they noticed the man was a half-elf. He led them all to a small shack where they could converse privately. In stature, he was tall, over 6 feet, with giant almond-shaped eyes and dark hair in a ponytail. He began their meeting with questions regarding their confrontation with the Witcher that they claimed to have killed. After overhearing their claims to Nightingale's men of killing Geralt, he assumed that they were just spinning a tale, but when he saw their fighting abilities, he believed them. Rather than elaborate on any details, Geralt tosses his amulet forward. Knowing that no Witcher would ever willingly part with their medallions, and nobody alive could craft one, the half-elf was convinced that they were telling the truth, or at least that's what he led them to believe that he thought. Just then, at the snap of a finger, the personality of the half-elf switched, and in a flash, he aggressively grabs Angoulême by the hair and puts a blade he had been hiding up to her throat. He demands Geralt and Cahir drop their weapons, and again, Geralt refuses. Their standoff doesn't last long, however, before horses bearing knights in full black armor appear outside the cottage. Geralt assumed some luck had finally come their way, but as he quickly realized, luck was not a trait that Geralt possessed. The knights burst in and order Cahir and Geralt disarmed, but this time they obeyed, suddenly being greatly outnumbered. A thin, bug-eyed man grabs Angoulême. He had been waiting to once again have her in his grasp, and Nightingale now had her in the half-elf's place. The three are dragged outside the hut. We, like Geralt, now learn that the Nilfgaardians have hired Nightingale and his men to serve the Empire. Nightingale was a vile man. Most of the time he resembled a frog more than a human, and he took great pleasure in telling Angoulême all about the gruesome death that was in store for her, as she stole from him, and he was looking to make an example out of her. This was of no concern to the half-elf, however. He only wanted Geralt, who he recognized the second that he saw him. He revealed his name, Shiru, and he served the sorcerer Vilgefortz. And on top of that, we have met him once before. In Baptism of Fire, Geralt had two informants who were gathering information about Ciri for him. Their names were Codringer and Fen, as you may recall. One day, a group of assailants came in and murdered Codringer at their front door, then set ablaze their place of business with Fen and the dead Codringer still inside. The leader of the murderers was Shiru. He told all of this to Geralt, and how much he enjoyed killing them, and that he aimed to give Geralt an equally slow death. Before said killing can occur, 3 separate explosions erupt, sending everything at the pit into chaos. Nilfgaardians began dropping, with arrows piercing their armor. Shouts roared over the explosions. The freedom fighters of the Free Slopes were ambushing the Nilfgaardians, and just in time, too. Amongst the chaos, Angoulême freed herself and killed her 2 captors with a knife that she had hidden in her boot. The town, in an instant, became a sea of flame. Geralt found his sword on the ground next. He began slaying both Nilfgaardians and Nightingale's men alike. And Cahir joins in as well. That is, before a hatchet comes flying through the air and collides with his head. The blow essentially scalps the young officer and removes him from the fight and leaves him helpless. Angoulême makes the wise decision to take 3 scrambling horses and use them to escape. Both her and Geralt notice Cahir's situation that results in massive blood loss and pain. She shouted to Geralt in an attempt to make him help her, but Geralt at the time was blinded by one goal: to kill Shiru. But luckily for the half-elf, another explosion occurs between them, and Geralt comes to his senses and races back to her, and the 3 make their escape. The 3 make it out of Rialto and ride hard for the border of Toussaint. They ride so fast, far, and hard that eventually Geralt's feeble horse dies of exhaustion. But knowing they were being pursued, Geralt devises a plan quickly. Angoulême would ride ahead and warn Regis, Milva, and Dandelion of their approaching pursuers, and Geralt would take Cahir and their remaining horse off the road and hike a more difficult route, as they could not both outrun their pursuers on one horse. It was their only choice, so they didn't bother debating it, and so Geralt took Cahir, and they walked. They got as far off the road as they could, and they hiked and hiked until Cahir's injury overtook his ability to walk any further. Though Geralt's plan had worked, and their pursuers had passed without noticing them, going back to the road was simply not an option. For if their pursuers returned, they'd be easy targets. So Geralt knew what he must do. He picked up Cahir, threw him on his shoulder, takes their horse by the reins, and carried on hiking. He kept going, through the rain, and through the excruciating pain in his knee, until even he was unable to walk anymore. He made a small fire for them in a cave, where given the pouring rain outside, he felt at ease, knowing that his trackers could not follow him through such weather. Finally able to rest, Cahir slowly begins regaining his mind. Things between them had been significantly better since their fight. Geralt was even beginning to like him a little bit. Cahir decided to tell Geralt a little bit about the dreams that he had been having lately. Both he and Geralt have spiritual links to Ciri, so they both shared a little bit of optimism that she may still be alive, and the two slowly drift off into sleep with a little optimism for a change. The morning comes, and they shared the one horse they had, and rode the entirety of the day, until once again the sun had set. They spent most of their evening catching and eating their fill of fish they caught in the river. Once both were full, Cahir once again wished to talk to Geralt about Ciri. Only this time, he wished to tell him the full story of his first meeting with the young girl. He told Geralt at the time he was a young officer, looking to prove himself, so at first he thought of Ciri as just a mission. Much like on the Ned, he had a small squad assigned to him, and Ciri was their only mission. The city of Sintra was completely engulfed in flame, being sieged by Nilfgaard. When he and his unit finally found her, she was under the protection of an elite unit of Sintran knights. No words were exchanged. The two units of soldiers engaged in a bloody skirmish surrounded by fire. By the time it was over, only Cahir and Ciri remained. He took her out of the city and had reservations about taking her to his emperor. He took her to a calm spot on the river and cleaned the dirt and blood off of her. He tried to be gentle and make it clear to the terrified girl that he meant no harm, which he truly didn't, but he sensed that his efforts were in vain. The two ride for a while, and eventually they both pass out from exhaustion. When he finally awoke, she was gone, and he was found by agents in the service of Vautier. They took him back to the capital city of Nilfgaard, where Emir had him imprisoned for a year. He was only released a year later, when Emir had him summoned in order to allow him to try again on the Ned, as he was one of the only Nilfgaardians who knew what she looked like. We saw this meeting all the way back in Blood of Elves, and as you may recall, he agrees to it. But he told Geralt he only agreed so that he could see her again. He went on to tell Geralt that he would dream about her as an adult. He knew it was really her, and not a fabrication of his imagination. He even told Geralt that he thinks he loves her, and surprisingly, Geralt doesn't even respond to Cahir, but instead, the two just drift into sleep. The next day, they continued their journey riding without saying much, until finally, they reach Regis, who was solely waiting for them. Regis wastes no time in filling Geralt and Cahir in what had occurred, and Gulami had reached them just in time. They crossed the border into Toussaint with a group of pilgrims, and as Geralt predicted, their pursuers didn't dare cross the border into Toussaint. They then followed a lead from the pilgrims and tracked down Regis's friend, named Flaminica, and being that she and her people were wise and all-knowing druids, she knew that they were coming, as well as why they were there to begin with. So Regis led Geralt to a cave formed beneath the Devil's Mountain, aka Mount Gorgon. where Regis said there was someone he must speak with. He then extended his hand out to Geralt, saying he must go in alone and without his sword and any other weapons. Whether it be desperation or trust Geralt had, he handed over his sword and he entered the cave. The cave was littered with bones that cracked and broke beneath his feet after every step. He didn't have to wander long, however, before he started hearing voices and commotion in the darkness. Several small creatures began harassing him, circling and biting his ankles. For a while, he resisted the urge, but he eventually grew frustrated and kicked one of the creatures away, which angered one of the larger creatures lurking in the darkness of the cave. A large, pot-bellied, hairy, and bow-legged creature known as a knocker came out of the darkness. He could speak quite well, and once he approached Geralt, he punched him in the face, sending him crashing to the ground. It had actually crossed Geralt's mind that this would be the moment where his life ended, until a voice, thundering throughout the cave, told all the creatures to stop. Geralt walked off his bloody lip and carried on to a separate cave that was lit by openings in the ceiling. A single elf stood in the cave, painting a purple bison with orange stripes. He paused from his painting to introduce himself. His elvish name was very long and hard to pronounce, so he told Geralt to call him Avallac'h. The two have a chat, and Avallac'h tells Geralt that future excavators will discover his painting and think that long ago, purple bisons roamed the region, giving the cave historical value. Real quick, have you ever noticed how Geralt talks to people? He's always so composed and keeps his cards close to his chest, no matter the situation. Anyway, it's Avallac'h who brings up Ciri first. He knew that's why Geralt is there, but he's reluctant to be helpful at first. And much like everyone before him, he tries to deter Geralt from pursuing her, as her destiny is bigger than he knows. Geralt is tired of people telling him this, so he decides to make his leave. But before he can, Avallac'h decides to show Geralt something. He gestures the wall where his painting was, and the wall separated, creating an opening, which they enter. A ball of light conjured by Avallac'h ascended upward, revealing massive columns and lifelike statues of elves crafted from Amel. Even the stripped of emotion Witcher couldn't help but gasp at the awesome sight he was beholding. Avallac'h revealed that his purple bison was an act to preserve the elven history hidden behind the cave. He then proceeded to explain who one of the statues was. Laura Doran, a pureblood elf who birthed a half-human child. She was also one of Ciri's ancestors. He then proceeded to tell Geralt of the prophecy involving Ciri and the world, which I would like to do a separate video of because I think it's interesting and it explains why Ciri is often referred to as the Swallow. But for this video, I'm going to assume you're about as interested as Geralt is. Spoiler, he's not. Despite Avallac'h's continued efforts to deter Geralt from interfering with destiny, Geralt tells him he believes his prophecy is about as real as his purple bison. So Avallac'h concedes, and he finally offers some assistance. He leads Geralt to some crystals in the cave that contain magical properties, and he instructs Geralt to grab onto them. He did as the elf instructed, and soon after he began seeing images. At first, the images were vague and hard to see, until a very clear one came to him. He snaps out of his premonition with no image of Ciri, but the knowledge that his friends are in danger. He tells Avallac'h that Milva, Dandelion, and Angulemi were in trouble, and he began to rush off to the exit, but Avallac'h instead instructed him to retrieve his sword and would secure him a mount that could get him to Cade Mirkvid quickly, as his horse stood no chance getting him there in time. The idea became much less appealing when he learned that the mount was the very same knocker that antagonized and nearly killed him when he first arrived, but he did it. From the second Geralt got on the knocker's back, he experienced absolute terror as the hairy, sweaty, and vodka-reeking creature ran and leapt through trees and over mountains. With such speed and power, Geralt had to use absolutely every ounce of strength to not fly off. He couldn't even tell where they were most of the time, and after one of the scariest experiences of Geralt's life, they arrive at the edge of Caed Mirkvid. The knocker knocked Geralt off his back and into the dirt, where he lied in silence. While he lied there contemplating his life, the knocker pointed to where he must go, which was completely engulfed by an opaque mist. He told Geralt it wasn't a natural formed mist, and before he departs, he tells Geralt he was impressed that he managed to hang on for the entirety of their journey, and he even apologizes for punching him in the face. Geralt humbly accepts the creature's apology, and the two separate with a newly developed respect for one another. When Geralt reaches the edge of the misted woods, he's greeted by a scattered litter of dead bodies. They were pilgrims, the ones his friends crossed the Toussaint border with. He doesn't have to wander long before he finds 4 bandits pettily looting from the bodies of the dead pilgrims. One of them was very poorly playing a fiddle, which made his approach all the more easy. Before any of them realized he was even there, he cut down all 4 with ease. He kept on, following the smell of smoke, and found another group of bandits. Only this time, an armored knight storms out of the fog at the bandits. The knight had red checkered armor and a helmet bearing the appearance of a pig. During his engagement of the bandits, they ripped him from his horse, and 3 bandits crack him down trying to break his defense and end him. Luckily for the knight, however, he had a guardian angel, in the form of a white-haired witcher, who arrived just in time. He killed the bandits with little time and effort, saving the knight just in time. The knight rises to his feet and introduces himself simply as the Checkered Knight, and he was very grateful to Geralt for saving him. Geralt explains his predicament to the knight while he was finishing off those bandits who haven't yet passed over, and he agrees to temporarily join forces in finding his companions. They continue to follow the nearing scent of smoke until finally they reach the source. A small settlement was being burned to the ground, the center of the focus of the attack being a fortified cottage on stilts. Geralt quickly becomes aware that both Shirou and Nightingale are both present, and the Checkered Knight quickly noticed his knight comrades fighting off bandits and Nilfgaardians alike. So he raced to their aid and pursued fleeing bandits, but all his commotion drew the attention of bandits to Geralt. He faced down one who was aiming a crossbow at him. He shot a bolt directly at Geralt's face, and he made a move to deflect it, but once again, the pain in his leg grew to an immense level and failed to obey his mind's commands. The bolt flew through the air and caught his ear on its way by. Pain seared through his head, and the arbalist prepared to shoot another bolt, but the angry Witcher struck him down before he could. Another bandit emerged from the fog and attacks Geralt, but as he quickly realized, it wasn't the usual criminal or rogue farm boy. He was fast, and he knew how to handle a sword. Not only that, he also quickly notices that Geralt is limping and adjusts his strategy to attack his weak side. Their fight looks to go in favor of the bandit, but luckily for Geralt, he makes a catastrophic error. Not an overextension or bad posture, something remarkably human, and luckily for Geralt, the bandit sneezes and gives Geralt the opportunity he needed to cut him down. One final bandit stood before Geralt, but he's struck in the back with an arrow and collapses. Milva ran to Geralt's side to be sure he was okay. She examined his ear, and it was bleeding profusely. She told him that his ear was gone, but before they're able to talk or treat his wound, they're forced to take cover behind a nearby wagon, as they were being charged by a cavalry of horses. The cavalry weren't bandits or Nilfgaardians. They were knights all in unique armor. The knights thought the two were bandits and wished to see them both hang, but luckily for them both, the checkered knight emerges and assures his knight companions that Geralt is a man of honor, and surely not any kind of bandit. The knights heed his words, and the knights began to instead be friendly to their new allies, and right on cue, Angulemi and Dandelion approach from the fortified cottage. Understandably, they're thrilled to see him, but there was no time for celebration just yet. One of the knights recognized Dandelion and identifies him as Viscount Julian, and how Duchess Henrietta would be delighted to see him and all his companions. The notion terrified Dandelion at first, but he learns that their beloved Duke had recently passed, and then suddenly the idea of going to their castle delighted Dandelion. I'm sure you can fill in the gaps in what happened here in the past. Angulemi approached with two of the bandits' now vacant steeds. She already knew where Geralt's head was. Nightingale and Shiru were both absent from the village, so they had to pursue them, and Milva wasn't about to let the two go alone. Dandelion goes with the knights to Castle Baclair and waits for them there while they pursue. They wasted no more time and rode through the forest until they reach a clearing, and they see something they are not prepared for. A bandit flailing his arms and running towards them. They aren't quick to react, as he wasn't armed and didn't portray any sort of threat. He ran right past them. His face was white as a sheet. Once he passes, the ground began to shake beneath them, and soon, what the bandit was running from became all too clear. All three horses buck our heroes into the dirt, and Geralt is overwhelmed by a sense of white-hot pain from his leg. A massive tree emerged from the clearing, walking and wailing like a behemoth. The sounds of screaming could be heard, coming from bandits tangled up in the giant creature's roots. Geralt screamed to his companions to run, but it was too late. Though immense, the creature possessed incredible speed. Before any could even try to run, the creature had all three of them entangled in its limbs. Two other bandits were entangled in the oak, and for one of the only times that I can think of, Geralt is genuinely terrified. Angulemi is in a panic and admits that she had soiled herself, while Milva passed out, and Geralt noticeably panics as well. With every step the creature made, their fear intensified, until they reach a village. Geralt takes note of a wicker cage full of panicked people, including both Nightingale and Shiru. Geralt does his best to look around the village, and he notices that it's populated entirely by druids. He took time to center his mind, and he called out to a druid that he prayed was present, Flaminica, Regis's friend and contact. After 3 desperate attempts, he finally gets the attention of an old druid. He tells her that he's a friend of the vampire Regis, and she calmly and effortlessly gets the great tree to release the 3 of them. Geralt hurries to Milva's side, and Flaminica assures him that their healers can help. She also had the tree release the other 2 bandits that were ensnared. She told them that she would allow them to live, so that they can tell others what happens when you invade their home. Following her threat, she orders the wicker cage to be burned, with the bandit still inside. Hearing this, Geralt sprang to life and pleaded that the druid spare them, as they had information that he needed. But despite several attempts to change her mind, she orders the cage be burned, with his informant still inside. The horrific screams of the bandits is followed by a deafening silence before Angoulême reminds Geralt that Shirou still had his medallion, and now it was lost to the flames. But he reassures her in saying that ever since the Ned, he was no longer a Witcher, and he will have to learn to live without it.